It's time for another Dice Tower review with Robert Geistlinger.
Well, here we are at the end of the world. Well, maybe not. Maybe somebody could help us. Seems to be infected, popping up everywhere. But luckily, our friendly pharmaceutical company, Raxxon, is here to help us out. So let's take on the roles of various city officials and try to help them. But maybe we shouldn't let Raxxon get too much power. Today, we're taking a look at Raxxon. So here we're taking a look at Raxxon. Now this is a cooperative game where players are taking on the roles of various city leaders in a world on the verge of an apocalypse. The government has also decided to pair your city leaders with Raxxon pharmaceuticals. So besides dealing with the impending zombie hordes, you also have to deal with the fact that Raxxon may not have the population's best interest at heart as well. To win the game, players must get all healthy survivors to the evacuation pile before either the city is overrun or until Raxxon gets enough power to take over everything. The game takes place over a series of rounds, with each round being referred to as a day. At the start of each round, an initial crowd will be set up depending on the number of players. Cards will be drawn from the population deck, and here we have set up a 3x3 grid, which is what you do for a 1 or 2 player game. Cards in the crowd are considered adjacent if they are adjacent to a card either to the top, bottom, left, or right. On a player's turn, they will start out by first triggering any consequences from previous taken actions. And you'll do this from left to right, top to bottom. So here we would trigger this consequence, this one, and then this one. Now I'll go over what each of the symbols mean a little bit later, but just know that you do trigger these. And the only way to get out of trigger them is to simply pass, but that will take you out of the rest of the round. After this, a player chooses an action to take. Now, all players at the table will have this basic investigate action, and that action does not require the use of an action token, and that simply allows you to flip over one card in the crowd. Beyond that, then the players will have actions that are kind of similar, but carry different penalties and different requirements. Here, Katie James has an evacuation where she can choose a row or column in the crowd with all cards face up and healthy and move those to the evacuation pile. But if she were to take that action, she would put a token there. Now, an important thing to note is that does not trigger the consequence. The consequence only triggers at the start of a player's turn if they choose not to pass. When cards are flipped, they can trigger effects. So if you have this little eye symbol, that's going to tell you to check. Now in this case, this carrier has it, but it means that if there are 2 out, including this one, that this effect will happen. So it's the first one. We'll flip over another card. This one is a chaotic, and its eye effect says that there's actually, if there's 1. And in this case, it means that we will then add another card to the crowd face down, and you're going to do it wherever there is the most adjacency, but in this case, it doesn't matter, so we'll place the card there. Then let's say we flip this. Well, that's 2. That means we have to add 2 cards face down. This has the most adjacency, and so does this. If we're going forward, we have this. Here we have a healthy. Now, most healthy people don't trigger when flipped. Rather, they trigger when they die. So if this innocent is killed, then this would happen. Now, I'll cover all of the different effects here in a minute. There's also going to be hostile ones out here if we have one. Hostile characters are healthy, but they can trigger effects as well. Well, they do trigger effects as well, but only when there's 2. So if there was this one and then say another one popped up, that would then cause us to have to flip over one. Whereas if we had 4, it would actually trigger the end of the day. The various effects that can happen in the game are listed here on the back of the book, and I figured it's probably be easier to show you from here. We have this one that looks like a skull and crossbone, which whenever this one happens, it triggers the effect that is on the character that has it, such as this familiar here, where if he dies, the active player must pass their next turn this day. The little eye symbol, as we showed before, just means that we'll check the card for its variable things here to see if we meet that requirement. This one here, which looks like a person with a plus, just means that we'll add a card face down to the draw pile. The one with the arrow is the same as our investigate, where we will flip over a card in the pile. We have this one here that looks like a little virus. If that one happens, we're actually going to take a card from that initial infection pile and add it to the population discard pile. We've got this one here, which allows us to draw a Raxxon card. And I say allow because, well, Raxxon's supposed to be our friend. But more often than not, it means that we have to draw a card. Now, these Raxxon cards are kind of cool in that when you draw one, you're going to check and see if first something happens. This one here says, if a non-hostile healthy card is face up in the crowd and there are one or more cards in the uncontained quarantine, then we resolve the card, either option 1 or option 2. But if that wasn't true, this would actually go to the untriggered Raxxon pile, meaning it could get shuffled back in. If, on the other hand, it was true, and let's say we went option 2, then we would go through it, and then this RP symbol, which is down here, means we increase Raxxon's power by 1. The next one is a question mark, and that it simply means that we draw a Raxxon card only if we choose to resolve the specified event after it. Now these are a little more rare. The RP we already covered. The little gas mask one means that we have to move a hostile card from the evacuation pile to the population draw pile. And then this one here with the stars and moon just means we have to immediately move to the end of day phase, which we will cover here in a minute. Now coming back to the board for a second, I just want to make sure that that sticks as to what happened. So this is the infection supply, this is the population discard pile, and this is the population. When we have to raise the infection, one of these comes into here. When we draw Raxxon cards, we draw them from here. If at any point we can move a character into contained quarantine, they go here. Uncontained quarantine is here, and this is the evacuation pile. Now the first thing that will happen in end of day phase, which happens either when all players have passed or if we've got that symbol with the little sun and moon, is first we will flip over all of the cards in the crowd and check them for any infected characters. So here we have 1, 2, 3. We have 3. Now you will have to add cards from the infection supply to the population discard pile, equaling that number up to a maximum of 4. Players will then add all of those cards from the crowd to the population discard pile. Anything in the uncontained will move to there. Contained quarantine will move over, and then players will clear all action tokens used on their board. Play will continue on a new day, repeating this again until all players have either moved all healthy population to the evacuation pile, in which case the players have won, or until either the infection deck you have to draw from it and you have no cards there, or if Raxxon's power ever hits 8, in which case the players have lost. So let's look at Raxxon. Now this was a game that when it first came out you couldn't get in retail. You had to get someone who had bought it from the publisher to give you an invite, and they would get 3 invites, and then if you bought it you got 3 invites, and it reminded me of the way, say, Gmail spreaded. And that was the first thing that actually made me interested in the game, and I did purchase my copy back during that campaign. Now, the game is available in retail now. Now for whatever reason I was excited to get it, but by the time I got it, I didn't play it. And it took me a while before I actually did. But once I played it, the first time I played solo. And I actually was really excited and I was super stoked to get this game to the table with other people. But then a few weeks went by and I didn't. And then I decided I would finally review the game. And so I sat down and I played it with other people, and I played some more solo games. And what's weird here is that I kind of prefer the solo game. And I'll explain a little bit more why later, but just to say that personally, for me, just to spoil my review a little, this is more of a solo game for me than the cooperative game that it's intended to be. Now, the game has a lot of interesting elements to it. I really like the press your luck mechanism within the game, because as you're flipping over cards, you're getting that anxiety, and I really do like that. Is this going to be a survivor? Is this going to be a an infected person who's going to cause us to have more problems. And then on top of that, you've got the press your luck within your actions. Sure, you could take the action that doesn't have any consequences, and that's just going to allow me to flip over someone in the crowd. But in order to take any meaningful actions, I have to put an action token down, which means on my next turn, I'm going to have to pay the cost of that. And I really like that, how that works out. I like the consequences. I like how actions have consequences. And that's something that seems realistic to the theme of this game. With that said, the theme of the game isn't really that strong. Not within just the overall gameplay. Where the theme comes out in this game, and probably my favorite thing in this game, is those Raxxon cards. Because those cards can actually tell a story within them. And I like how they're dependent on things that are happening in the game. Whether or not we've got a hostile survivor in the crowd. Whether or not a certain character is in play. And I like how the cards adapt themselves to what's going on. And there can even be cards where I needed to have another card that's been triggered previously, just combining this story. And that is where the theme comes alive in this game, because beyond that, this is a pretty abstract game. And with that said, I enjoyed the artwork in the game. The board, maybe not so much, but I did like that they took the care to do unique artwork across the cards, and even giving the survivors individual names, which allows you to kind of associate personalities to them. And that's something that I enjoy when companies do in games. Now, beyond that, the game does suffer from a small problem in that it can get stale. Because if you're only playing the game as it is in the box, well, you've got a limited amount before you're going to realize that you're just doing the same thing over and over again. But there is enough variability there in terms of the way the crowd lays out to at least present a unique challenge from game to game and from round to round. But by and far, it's going to start to feel a little the same. Now, Plaid Hat does have a website where you can get scenarios and stories and different ways to set up the game that will at least alleviate it to some degree, but I do overall prefer to judge a game more based on what's in the box versus things that I have to go and get. But because of the way they published this game, I felt that it was required to maybe take into consideration the website. Overall, I do like the game. It just doesn't rate that high for me because after a few plays, again, I started to feel just a little samey. However, as I said, I preferred this game solo. And that's because the solo game, I didn't feel that as much. And that's because in that version, you can change characters from round to round. And for some reason, that just made things more interesting to me. So for me, this is the type of game that if somebody in your group has, maybe it's something you don't need. But if you prefer solo games or you like solo games, then by and far, this is a good game to take a look at. For me personally, I'm probably not going to keep it. It just fell a little flat for me. I have plenty of pressure luck games that I'll play with other people and solo games that I would much rather prefer to this game. The theme, if you're into the Dead of Winter universe, I will state that I'm not a fan of Dead of Winter as a game, but I like the theme of it. But if you're into Dead of Winter, this may be a nice game for you. It does come with some promo cards for Dead of Winter, so that's already a bonus. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Raxxon, and it's helped you decide whether or not this may or may not be a game you want to take a look at. And I look forward to seeing you folks next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.